Stuart, everybody.
Okay, great. So if you happen to have been on the Jetpack changelog page in the last 19 days, then you might have seen this innocuous looking line at the top. Important security update CB 2014-0173. And if you Google that, then you find something published on the 10th of April, which says the Jetpack plugin 2.9.3, blah blah blah, allows remote attackers to bypass intended restrictions and publish posts. So what does that mean in person speak? That means that basically if you're running a version of Jetpack earlier than that, then an attacker can potentially publish posts on your WordPress site without your permission. Which is a little bit scary. So if you go to the Jetpack log, then you'll see that this was, they found this in an internal security audit, so they don't have any evidence that this exploited before, but now that everyone knows that this vulnerability exists, then there's a chance that people will. So yes, I'm Duncan Stuart. I work for a company called DXW. We build and host WordPress websites for the public sector, and obviously they care quite a lot about security. And so I want to share some ideas about WordPress security. First thing I want to talk about is how to think about security. So there's a classic way of breaking down the impacts of different kinds of attacks. So they can impact these three things. So confidentiality, obviously people getting information that you don't want them to get at. The obvious example might be if you have a private area on the site that has some sensitive information. But also usernames and passwords, and actually the content, the configuration of your site. If someone can get at that, then they can use it to do other kinds of attacks. Integrity is about the information that you put in being the information that comes out. An example of an integrity attack might be someone defacing your site, or like the Jetpack thing, publishing things that you don't intend to be there. Availability is whether people can actually use the site. That might be taking it down completely, making it crash, or it could just be slowing it down to the extent that it's effectively unusable. So, all security attacks affect one or more of these things. So, a common way of attacking a WordPress site is to use a known vulnerability in a plugin that is installed on that site. So, all of these are things that an attacker can potentially do with outdated versions of plugins. All of these are fixed now. So the first one, publish posts, Jetpack, that's an access control bypass vulnerability. Display the entire contents of the user's table as an SQL injection. So that doesn't actually give you passwords, but it's kind of like taking the safe home with you. You can crack it a lot more easily. Steal usernames and passwords when users log in. So there's a cross-site scripting attack. It requires you to send a logged-in administrator to a URL that you've specially constructed, but that's doable. And steal usernames and passwords, that's a scary vulnerability. But even more scary is the next one, which is the result of an arbitrary code execution, which means that an attacker can pretty much do anything that an admin can, and things that an admin can't do. Create and delete users, create and delete posts, and take complete control of your server. So if anyone's running an old version of WP Supercache, then you might want to run away and update it now. Make your site totally unresponsive. This particular vulnerability was an SQL injection which basically slows down the connection to the database so that the site becomes unusable. So attackers can do some slightly scary things, and you can probably see how you can chain some of these together to achieve even worse effects. So how do you actually protect yourself? Well, the most important thing is to always keep WordPress and your plugins updated. That's important because updates can, like this Jetpack update, can include security patches. And often what happens is that the security patch and the details of the vulnerability are released at the same time. So as soon as that patch comes out, there may be attackers who are trying to work out how to use that and get it. Keep your server updated. I'm sure everyone's heard about the recent Heartbleed vulnerability. If your site's on some kind of shared hosting, then hopefully they've dealt with all those kinds of things. But if you're managing your own thing, then make sure that your whole stack is up to date and down to the operating system. Choose your plugins carefully. As I said, plugins are an easy way of introducing a security hole into your site. And I'm going to talk a bit more about that in a second. Use strong passwords. You can have the best security in the world, but if someone can get hold of your password, then you can. And lock down your WordPress installation. There's a great page on the Codex about this called Hardening WordPress. And it covers things like changing the file permissions on some of the files in your WordPress installation to limit the kind of damage that an attacker can do. Some of it's quite technical, some of it requires some fiddling around on the command line, but even if that's something that you're not so comfortable with, there are things that anyone can do to make their WordPress installation more secure. So, choosing plugins carefully. WordPress's plugin functionality is kind of a double-edged sword. Well, it's an incredibly easy and convenient way of adding functionality to your site. It's also a very convenient and easy way of making big security holes. And anyone can run it. Yeah, there's a reason that WordPress.com doesn't have a plugin page. So, the best thing that you can do to give yourself confidence that a plugin is safe for use is for you or someone who understands about security to go in and actually eyeball the code of that plugin, looking for specific security vulnerabilities. But if that's not possible, then there are a number of things that you can look at to give you a picture of how good, how safe this plugin might be to use. So none of these things taken individually are particularly meaningful, but together they give you a picture. So the first one is size. Obviously a massive plugin. There's much more space for above to hide in, and it's less likely that it may come up. And particularly if the plugin is considerably bigger than what you'd expect based on what it actually does. If it doesn't do much, but it's got a lot of code and anyone else. The age is very important. WordPress flags up if it's not had any updates in over 2 years. Our rule of thumb is generally 6 months. You want to ask some questions if there have been any updates. If it's a trivial plugin, obviously, then they're not necessary. If you look at the forum, if there are lots of questions and they're not getting answered by the plugin developer, then you want to ask why. You want to ask, is this guy going to be able to respond to any problems that come up, fix any bugs, fix any security issues? The number of downloads is something you want to take into account. If something's been downloaded a lot and used a lot, then security bugs may have had more chance to rise to the surface, although that's not necessarily a given. Obviously, with this Jetpack bug and the gravity forms, there have been some areas of concern as well. And the author, if the author of this plugin has a number of other plugins that are well used and look okay, then that's possibly a good sign, although it's not necessarily a bad sign. Another thing you can do is check for advisories. Advisories are things like that CVE, which are published vulnerabilities, often with a demonstration of how you can actually exploit them to achieve some bad effect on someone's site. There's a lot of overlap between some of these, and unfortunately, to the best of our knowledge, there isn't really a definitive one place that you can check. But we're working on something to make it easier for ourselves and others to check for WordPress and WordPress plugin vulnerabilities. Okay. So plugin developers and actually theme developers, how do you avoid being part of the problem? There are lots of things to think about, but the most important one, which is kind of resonates with the first talk, is be careful about untrusted data. So that's anything that comes from the user, anything that comes from an admin or from a URL parameter, anything that basically isn't totally under your control. You need to be very careful with how you handle that, because you don't want any PHP or JavaScript from outside getting executed inside your system. That's a lot of security. So database queries, so there's a number of WordPress functions for escaping these things. Database queries, prepared statements are the recommended way of doing that. Nothing can escape your database query better than your database itself. If you're outputting data on the page, then there are a number of different methods that you can use depending on what the data actually is. And I'm not going to go into what eval does, but suffice it to say, be very careful with it to the extent of almost saying never use it. So, the next thing, passwords. So the week partly, hopefully everyone's reset all of their passwords for everything. How do you reset them to good passwords is the question. So you may be familiar with this SACD cartoon. 20 years of effort, we've successfully trained everyone to use passwords that are hard for humans to remember but easy for computers to get. So a lot of these tricks that you might be familiar with, substituting things for numbers, requiring that users have capital letters and numbers in their passwords, they just don't really work, particularly on short passwords. So passwords are actually usually the easiest way to get into the system. And if you only take away one thing from this talk, it's that long and memorable passwords, long meaning at least 10, 12 characters, are considerably better than short and complex passwords. Another thing to take into account is the name of your admin user. Since WordPress 3, you've been prompted to name your admin user, but all the sites may still have one named admin. And although it is easy to find out the list of admin users on the site, the first thing that an automated attack will usually do will be to try a load of passwords against a user with admin. So why make it easy? So one of the things that we do on our hosting platform for our clients is we run regular password audits where we try and crack our users' passwords. And so we have a process that sits there running for a couple of days, and we reset all of the passwords which we were able to break, because a couple of days is nothing at all. And you can probably see from these that most of our clients are central government. And you can also see all of these passwords are at least 10 characters long, which is considered a kind of pretty decent minimum. But because they're just using a dictionary word with some simple substitutions of numbers for letters, or just adding some numbers at the end, they're basically easily breakable. So be more complicated. And finish off just a quick shameless plug. What we do, we run a secure hosting platform for WordPress websites, which is designed around the needs of the public sector. One of the things that we do, well, I've left as an example, is password restrictions. We've got some WordPress stuff that restricts the length of passwords and encrypts it using a better algorithm than the WordPress default. We also lock down plugins. So we don't let our clients upload plugins themselves. The process is they say they want a plugin, we code review it, and then if we don't find anything particularly wrong with it, then we'll upload it for them. And we've recently started publishing the results of those reviews on a site called securityfix.com. And I've recently been working on a plugin which looks at the data in that and pulls it into your plugins page and displays a little widget down the side if there's been a review of that specific version. So that's currently in alpha, but hopefully we'll then be able to release that. So thank you for listening. I'm DGM Stuart on Twitter. These slides will be up at bit.ly, wb-long and wb-sec. And if there are any questions, I'll do my best to answer them. Hi.
Yeah, the other day I was looking at, I found a bit of information that actually is quite easy to actually print out. And you know, if you use the sort of URL, you can do something like question mark author equals one,
Yeah.
like that, and it prints out the use of the usernames. However, I did discover, I think by accident, that if your username is something dot something, then actually it doesn't print out the username. Is that something that you found? Or do you want to comment on that?
So there's a purist school of thought which says that actually usernames shouldn't really be considered to be sensitive data, and so it's not a massive area of concern. But as I said, it's just about making. There are a lot of automated attacks which might only look for an admin user called admin, and an automated attack might not go to that length to find out the actual.
All right, thanks.
Do you think WordPress is worthwhile?
Do I think
WordPress is worthwhile.
WordPress? Actually, what does that do?
Isn't that the automatic kind of keep your site safe? So it just kind of various text and code and things like that.
Cool.
So every few hours as well. They batch your sites every few hours.
They've actually wanted.
It's constantly backing your site every few hours.
Right. Yeah. So backups are kind of important. So if you get hacked, then the thing is that well, a way of dealing with that is to roll back to the previous version, and that might. But so I don't know the details of what this plugin does, but some of the security plugins that I've seen, what they do is the same kind of hardening that this codex page hardening WordPress talks about. So they change some configuration settings to close out some obvious loopholes. They're kind of limited in what they can do, but they're very well considered. We haven't really looked into them.
Any reason they were recommending to that application?
So I'm not personally aware. Is that something that is there support for that? Are there actually plugins which do that?
Yes. It's called Google Authenticator. It's the main hardware. You can install it, and as you go in, once you say you phone,
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm not quite sure why we haven't looked into that. It might just be because. No, I don't know. Yep.
I'd say probably we haven't looked at that because I think a lot of our, although a lot of our clients are concerned about security, a lot of them are also not concerned about security, and although we wanted to avoid having a capture, unfortunately we did have to put a capture because of the amount of Russian attackers and things we get trying to hit the platform. And that people are very irritated by it. You know, we've had lots of people ask us to take it down, but it is unfortunately like quite a core part of us stopping them from, stopping the Russian attackers from taking the servers down. And I think it is something we'd look at in the future. But I absolutely see that we get some resistance from our clients on that, which is a shame because it is a really good idea.
You also get resistance from your clients when you say, I like this plugin, and you don't know.
No, actually, I mean, certainly they are, if it takes longer, then sometimes, that does cause some concern for them, but in the most part, they're really relieved to hear when we find a big old security vulnerability in it. That tends to be the response. I don't think I've ever had anyone come back to us and say, I know that you found this great old security vulnerability, but I'd like to install this anyway. It's sort of a bit of a thin line walking between what we're going to enforce and and what people want. But unfortunately, people's awareness of security isn't really good enough to know, a lot of the things that Duncan listed today, like the kinds of things that people can do. And that's, we found, is one of the tricks really that Duncan's not very good at, explaining in real terms what this means. It's not an XSS, it's not cross-site scripting, but what does that actually mean to you? Well, it might mean all sorts of kinds of things that. But two-factor authentication is definitely worth a go. If you have got a reliable user base and have mobile phones that are in a good position to be able to do that. Certainly, if you're an individual admin, I see no reason to go ahead and install that.
I'm plagued by spammer subscribers, so I maybe get 50 new registrations a day, and I don't know how many are spams. But you can look at my automatic assumption is anybody's got the email address mail.ru, I believe. And anybody who's got an email address with lots of numbers and letters doesn't mean anything. But have you got anything which will go through your mailing list and detect possible spammer IDs?
Spam, dealing with spam is outside my personal expertise.
Was it just Gizmo do that?
It is like the spam, but I just want to clean my list, God knows how many thousands.
Oh, I see. We do, I'm not sure it's open source. We have a plugin we built that occasionally, so once every 3 months, it checks whether or not someone's logged into their account and sends them a prompt to confirm whether or not they've logged in. If they don't follow through on that within a month or something, we delete their account. And that's, I think, we found the most, not just actually for spammers, we don't get too many of them anymore, but actually particularly on government websites when people, or anything to do with a job, when people leave their jobs, often those accounts don't get taken off. And it's a really important security measure to make sure that not only people have decent passwords, but that you're taking them off regularly if they don't work with the organisation anymore. You'd think so, or on YouTube, anyone who's responsible for, well, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much.